so moving forward then, we have 6 speakers and we have 90 minutes. I would suggest every speaker takes 12 minutes and leave 3 minutes for question. At the most, you can have 15 minutes. We are beginning now, and we will have a presentation from Dr. Rolando Flores Pelarza, the Dean and Chief Administrative Officer in the College of Agricultural, Consumer and Environmental Sciences at New Mexico State University, Las Cruces. The floor is yours, sir. 12 minutes, no more than 15.
Thank you very much. This is a great opportunity, and I appreciate Orlando's side try to stay in time with the presentation. First of all, I really I'm humbled by all the presenters and all the high level of information that has been brought here in. From what I'm going to present is from the point of view of the land-grant university in a dry lands like it is the New Mexico State University. What is what we are doing and how are we trying to move away in all of this? So I'm going to do very briefly on this slide to try to save some time. First of all, what is the mission of our college? And this is part of the impacting the environment and sciences, because we see our role as an engine for economic and community development in New Mexico. But how that this moves into a larger sphere is what we want to say. NMSU is, as I mentioned, on a land-grant Hispanic serving institution, committed to work globally to create international partnerships for better future. In NMSU, we're strengthening our international insertion of ACEs, particularly in some of the characteristics of our dry land area, and working with the Latin American region as a part of our historical part of our history and part of where we are located in the arid and semi-arid land. The main objective of NMSU as a university is to working with the grand challenges of our time and motivating a specific. We found we have our activities under 4 principal pillars, which are food and fiber production and marketing, water use and conservation, family development and health of New Mexicans, and environmental stewardship. So as you can see, we're intrinsically linked to these purposes of the meeting that we're looking. One of the major important things is, as I mentioned, from a cultural and historical point of view, how we integrated in the Latin American region. We are located in the southwest of the U.S. and then area and semi-arid area, and we have been building strategic alliances with different sources or groups of producers and farmers and ranchers, and we just created the Strategic Alliance of the Chihuahuan Desert, which is basically the farmers and ranchers that we are connected in the southern part of the United States, in New Mexico, and the northern part of the Chihuahua, the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. We also have been banking on our strength and the relationship with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture. And this cooperation is based around the major, formulated around some of the needs of the Latin American region and how we can, as a land-grant university in the southern part of the United States, will work together to try to solve these grand problems that we have. As you can, very familiar with all this information, and it has been presented by the previous speakers. This is where we are located, and our action is basically working directly with the AICA in the institute. One of the things that we try to do is how do we make our systems more efficient, and how can we work and apply some of the technologies that we can use to improve the situations that we have in in the ecoregion characteristics of New Mexico. We are no strange to some of the major problems that have been associated with climate change. And this year alone, we have had the largest and biggest fires in New Mexico. And this has been experimenting normally dry conditions for over the last 12 years. 27% of New Mexico currently is under a moderate drought. 47% of New Mexico area is experiencing severe drought, and 14% of Mexico is experiencing extreme drought. 0.3% of New Mexico is experiencing exceptional drought. So as you can see, we are experiencing all of these problems that have been mentioned before, and we are working on this, how to go. So what is the strategic role of science and technology and in order to provide a dynamic assessment of impact in climate change and ecosystems? And some of the basic things that we are trying to do is modeling not only vegetation, carbon cycle, dry land, water, and energy exchange, and understand land surface atmosphere interactions at the local regional scales of the southwestern of the United States dry lands. So the first thing that we're doing is a characterization of climatological, agricultural production systems, and data collection. This model is based on scientific and technological information to contribute to policymakers to formulate policies. One of the major things that we are looking is a holistic approach to a multidisciplinary teams. As a Hispanic serving institution and a minority serving institution, we don't have or we don't count with the large fundings that we have or the large depth of knowledge in many cases. So this, we have been solving it by creating teams of scientists that are tackling bigger problems. We are moving in the last year, we went from 64 meteorological stations to 90, and we expect to have close to 215 for next year stations. This is extremely important because not only we get the data, but we also have an impact on the economics for the insurance applications. We also have the Jornada experimental range, which is over 100 years old of continuous data collection in semi-arid lands. The grazing behavior of pastures and animal records and water management under critical conditions. The most limiting factor that we consider in agriculture, it was mentioned previous speaker, there was about 80% of the water is used in agriculture. In New Mexico, it's around 85 to 88%. So it creates a very challenge to work with urban areas and management in the Spanish presence in New Mexico by the natives in the area. So we are trying to cope with all these issues, and our new sources, and some of those is developing alternative sources of water, like with processing of produced water. New alternative crops, obviously, is one of the major things that we are trying to do, and also the role of economy and public policy and hydrologic characteristics as a contribution to explaining access to safe drinking water are being looked at. So we are in the middle of the biggest problems that we have, and we have to try to solve by bringing different technologies from different areas. In this case, we are trying to use robotics in production and some other mechanisms. Along with this, obviously, we are working in carbon management. And one of the major things that we are trying to work is in developing data analysis for the different carbon, the alternative that can be managed and can be developed and with cost efficient in 4 different areas. So we're looking at the carbon management in range areas and urban areas, forest areas, and in farming. Let me mention that 28%, that New Mexico is the 5th largest state in the union, but the forest area is 28%. So in this part of all this comprehensive study that we are working with our scientists and working is the connectivity between the forest, the rangeland, cropland, and the urban areas. Inclusively, as a part of our priorities is digital agriculture, but digital agriculture not only looking into the management of introduction of more heavily mechanization in some areas due to the reduction of the availability of labor, but also in terms of data collection and management and analysis. Needless to say, also in terms of developing genetic resources, the genetic resources for these agroecologists, as it was mentioned by Dr. Lala, is extremely important, and we need to start working. We are working on this very heavily. We are working with different, for example, in the area of forest, we just had very close call, not early this year, when a forest fire almost burned our science center, and we had to move very quickly to save the seed bank and to move the seed bank further from the fires, and especially because that seed bank is where we have all the drought area, resistant varieties for trees. Along with all of these, the combination of renewable energy, and this is an example of a couple of science areas, science stations that we have, centers where we conduct research, and we are implementing solar panels at a large scale in collaboration with electric power companies, as well in wind production. And one of our ranches, we have located about 39 windmills that export the energy to the city of Los Angeles. And obviously, New Mexico depends strongly on the oil, and so we're looking at creating a sustainable management. Nothing we can do if we cannot maintain a bioeconomy, and a bioeconomy in which we actually are able to develop not only the subsistence. We cannot think about the big, we keep talking and listening about the big migrations and how this is going to be affecting and is affecting in many countries. But at the same time, we have to create conditions for those farmers and those producers in those areas for adapting climate variability. We have been, I don't want to extend too much on this, but one of our major areas that we are conducting development trials is the reintroduction of the criollo cattle in our area. And this criollo cattle comes from the Tarahumara areas in northern Mexico, and make it a more efficient and sustainable. So in summary, I don't want to extend anymore. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm at a point of concluding this, and I just want to say that even though, because of all these big issues that worldwide we are working, our approach at New Mexico State University, we consider ourselves a part of the global impact, and working with the ICA in Latin America, but also we see our future in these 6 areas, these areas working in carbon management, obviously, genetic resources, in bioeconomy, renewable energy, water management, and digital agriculture. So this is, I hope I have conveyed a very succinct and very modest approach that we are having in New Mexico State University to try to contribute to the solutions of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Galarza. I think in the interest of time, we are probably going to continue, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end of the session. Therefore, I want to move on to the next speaker, Dr. M.L. Jott, whose title of presentation is Sustainable Intensification and Enhanced Resilience of Drylands, Constraints and Strategy. Dr. Jott is Principal Scientist at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, CIMMYT, based in Kathmandu, Nepal. Dr. Jott.
Thank you so much, sir. I just moved to Ikris.
You just moved to Ikris, yes.
That CV was old one. Thank you so much. In next 12 minutes or 13 minutes, I'll share what are the constraints and what should be the strategies in terms of sustainable intensification and enhanced resilience of the drylands. At the cost of repetition, I'll again repeat what are the challenges on the smallholder systems in the dry. And when we talk about the drylands, it's a global hotspot for contemporary as well as the future climatic variability, where our natural resources are really highly stressed. But at the same time, we need more nutritious food from less of the inputs, and also the rapidly degrading or depleting natural resources, having higher variability in terms of the climate. Also, when we see the smallholder system, the global map, all the red areas denotes the very smallholder farmers. So the dominance of the smallholder farmers are in the drylands. And those farmers are providing 75% of the food what we consume in the Asia and Africa. That means the smallholder farmers are very critical for us. Also, when we see the relationship of the smallholder farmers, the dominance of the drylands as well as the malnourishment, they are closely aligned. So wherever you see the smallholder farmers, they are malnourished, and also the water limited scenarios. The climate change already have posed serious threats to us over past 50, 60 years. We have lost almost 21% of the total factor productivity because of the climate change, and that to the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. And it's more in case of the drylands, especially in the Africa. At the same time, there are significant environmental footprints of our food systems, and the food systems are contributing 18 gigatons of the carbon dioxide equivalent, which is 34% of the total global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. And I think of the 18 gigatons, 71% come from the agriculture and the land use changes, and the rest are coming from the value chain. That means the production of the system or the food production is something very important that we have to address the issues. Other issues which were highlighted by Professor Lal and others, the water salinization, and also biodiversity, I think with the climate change, which is more, there are extinction of a lot of species, the recent crisis on the food, energy, and the fertilizer, and of course, a lot of emerging pests and diseases because of the climate change. The drylands are very critical for achieving the sustainable development goals, because the drylands, are hosting almost 3 billion people, and half of the livestock of the world. And the people, there are a lot of people living under the chronic, poverty. We have left only with the 8 annual harvest to achieve our sustainable development goals. That means we need to move faster, not only to stop degenerating our natural resources, but also to regenerating our natural resources for our secured future. And I think sustainable intensification can help us in regenerating our natural resources. So when we talk about the sustainable intensification strategy for systemic transformation of the drylands, I would say the quality science has to grow. The quality science is important. Science for the food systems transformation to our sustainable development goals. We need to have the strategic and complementing partnership. That means collective action, working together. We need greater investments, more people, not only the government, but also the philanthropy, foundation of the civil society need to put more money. for sustainable intensification of the drylands. We need to have the production to consumption continuum. That means the One Health focus. That's what we need to put together. And I think how we deliver that science to the society, we need to have science of scaling, linking our research output with the local, national, regional, or the global priorities with appropriate business models. But there are challenges in terms of scaling the sustainable intensification, because most of our agriculture research and development has been component focused, which often limits the scaling and the potential for impact at a scale, and that amplifies the trade-off between the livelihood objectives and the sustainable intensification actors. Because we got a system, farmer got a system that consists of the genetic, the socio-economic, the ecological, the elements. So that means we need to understand the farm profitability versus the ecosystem services where we convert. So the trade-offs in that respect are something very, very important. So I would propose 10-point agenda for sustainable intensification of the dryland. The first one is one size doesn't fit all, because we can have a common set of the principles that we can identify, but there's a whole lot of diversity of the farms, the farming system, the agroecology. We need tailor-made solutions for the sustainable intensification, integrating genetics, ecological and socio-economic innovations and the information, considering the whole farm and the household issues rather than commodity-centric approach. And we can have, the designing tools for sustainable farming systems. The second one is we need to map the crop types and prioritize the cropping systems and farming systems to deploy the sustainable intensification. And the sustainable intensification is important for addressing some of the issues like fertilizer. The legumes can address some of those issues. The grain legumes can contribute 35 teragrams of the nitrogen annually for biological nitrogen fixation. There has been a significant advancement in terms of the geospatial technologies which can help us in a spatial and temporal mapping of the crop types and cropping systems for designing our sustainable intensification approaches. Now, we need to have the targeted bundled system solutions, and those solutions for congruence between the three pillars of the sustainability: the people, the planet, the profit. And I think the science evidence-based consensus with the context and farming system-specific adapted bundled sustainable intensification practices with well-defined recommendation domains are required for accelerated adoption of sustainable intensification practices, and for which we need to have the whole farm approach, the systems approach for designing those things. We also need to have a phased build-on approach, because neither we have the full package of the sustainable intensification ready, nor those can be developed overnight. But that doesn't mean that we should hold or we should wait for long. So we can have a phased approach, that can help us immediately taking some of the solution and building the confidence of the people or the farmers. And we can tap into the available knowledge, technologies, or the success story. We need to have the soil biobanks for sustainable intensification, because soil crop microbiome interactions govern the management practices, the production potential and sustainability of the sustainable intensification systems. And there's a whole lot of evidence on how the soil health, and sustainable intensification helps in the nutrition and the human health. So we need to have comprehensive research, around those ecological plant production, rhizosphere, microbiome effects for sustainable intensification. The sixth one is harnessing the power of the digital tools. I think there are a lot of advancement in the digital tools, how digital tools can help in prioritization of the sustainable intensification options and also delivery of those options, because sustainable intensification is knowledge intensive that needs digital tools and techniques for taking it forward. The data-driven agronomic management for advisory, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning tools for site-specific recommendations for fertilizer, for water, for agrochemicals, and other tools. The seventh, agenda I would propose is that we need approaches, tools, and protocols and processes for the ecosystem services, making a balance towards the environmental, social, and economic dimensions. For example, Professor Lal, the whole talk was on the carbon farming, and the carbon sequestration potential of different soils, different agroclimatic conditions varies. But I think that may limit the farmers' incentives for the carbon credit. But in addition to the carbon sequestration, if we can go for the life cycle analysis and capture how much carbon emission mitigation we are having through sustainable intensification that can add to the value to the carbon credits. But we need approaches, tools, protocols, and tracking, verification, and of course enabling policies for mainstream the sustainable intensification in research and development plans and capture the carbon sequestration potential, which can create a pull factor for accelerated adoption of the sustainable intensification system. For that, we need to define business models, opportunities. We need to identify the potential niche for scaling and accelerated adoption of the sustainable intensification through business models, starting from the market segmentation to the implementation of those things. And for that, we need comprehensive assessment for consumer perceptions and preferences, the market side, whether local level or regional level or the international level, and also the entrepreneurship opportunities for not only for the agricultural produce, but also the ecosystem services from the sustainable intensification, for example, carbon credit. We need to have the strong program on the capacity development, the human resource development, and the certification courses for taking the sustainable intensification forward. And for that, we need to have a new cadre of sustainable intensification community of practitioners. Inclusion of the sustainable intensification in the core curriculum, development of the inclusive training module, the hands-on training on the bundled sustainable intensification solution, and of course, certification courses or the centers of the excellence on sustainable intensification. Finally, science evidence-based policy and investment, that's something very, very important for scaling sustainable intensification and making drylands resilient. And evidence what I would like to show is the conservation agriculture example, which meets the multiple objectives. If you see the multi-criteria assessment, on all those aspects, but then optimization of those conservation agriculture or sustainable intensification practices requires attention to the location-specific performance. As I said on the first point or the first bullet, which was one size doesn't fit all. That means we have the context-specific, the recommendations or the adoption of those practices. We try to put, how these different agri-food systems contribute to the sustainable development goals. So if you go with the subsistence agriculture or the conventional agriculture, that negatively impact the sustainable development goals. But if you talk about conservation agriculture-based sustainable intensification, that positively contribute to several of the sustainable development goals directly and others through enabling policy directly. So with this, thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity. I hope I was on time.
Thank you, Dr. Jat. Yes, you are very much on time, and maybe there's a time for one question from the audience. Perhaps I could ask you, you
Yes.
mentioned sustainable intensification. Some people are focusing on eco-intensification. Do you think there's a difference between the two? And which one of those two, if you have a choice, would prefer for dry lands?
I think there is no much difference. I think there are different phrasing of the terminology around. Sustainable intensification or ecological intensification are more or less same. So
Okay.
I don't see much of the difference between the two.
Thank you. We still have a minute or any other question for Dr. John. If not, we will come back. Hopefully we'll save time and come back at the end and have some more discussions. Thank you. And we move on to the next speaker, which is Dr. Rao, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, who is the director of ICR's NARM program in Hyderabad in India. And the title of his presentation is Identification of Appropriate Agro Management Techniques towards Climate Change Adaptation in Tropical Ecosystem. Dr. Rao, it's a pleasure to invite you and give you the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a great pleasure to present under the chairmanship of you. As suggested that the topic, I will be presenting what are the site-specific appropriate agro-management techniques towards climate change adaptation, particularly with reference to tropical ecosystems. As the previous speakers also highlighted that recent IPCC report, and I will not repeat, but one of the caution is that for every 1 degree rise in temperature, there will be 77% the increase in the intensification of extreme rain events, which we are seeing in many tropics. Then the tropical ecosystems of the world is a key locations where intensive populations, Arctic population is living, and we have larger food demand, hunger, and poverty are the important features. The carrying capacity of the system is relatively low, and low agriculture productivity and larger yield gaps are there, and highest climatic vulnerability and rapid increase of extreme climate events are witnessed in this region. Again, these regions, there are some indicators and how the climate change, the impacts are shown that in fact, the extreme rain events are increasing and the temperature, of course, and I'll be taking forward how temperature affects in food systems this year, and extreme events and sea rise and glaciers. And in fact, in tropics, since it presents many developing countries, and we have two important mechanisms, adaptation and mitigation. But basically, the presentation is that climate change adaptation led to mitigation, though many adaptation measures have co-benefits of mitigation. When we come to the Indian, broadly see that South Asia and India, that if you see that entire India, in fact, is vulnerable to the climate change. It's larger and smaller or larger, but we can see that most of Indian part is vulnerable to climate change. And recently, last 22 years, we have seen that how extreme climatic events, which are seen in terms of severe droughts, where 23-25% of lesser monsoon. At the same time, the many coastal systems are witnessed with the floods and cyclones. So another important, really alarming feature of the climate change in Indian ecosystem and South Asia is that traditionally the dry regions are witnessed with the floods, and really high rainfall regions are witnessed with the droughts, particularly mid-season droughts. That's why new strategy, new amplifiers are required for climate change adaptation. One of the impact, what is the economic loss of climate change just in one day? In fact, in coastal Andhra Pradesh near Visakhapatnam, really the economic loss is $20 billion because of Hudhud cyclone, both infrastructure, agriculture, and other components. Recently, one of the important aspects we can see that that the heat wave affects on wheat yields in 2022. Recently, Union Minister of Commerce and Industry, who spoke that World Economic Forum on May 2022, suggested that what kinds of wheat yield reductions are there due to heat waves during the month of March. The estimations are that at least we get around 7 to 8 million tons of wheat yields this year. Climate change and agriculture not only affects agriculture per se, that it also affects all subsectors like horticulture, livestock, poultry, and fisheries. In terms of seawater intrusion, India has 7,200 kilometers of coastline, and a lot of hailstorm effects are there and coming intensively horticulture systems and heat wave, floods, cyclones, and droughts. So agro-management technologies are critical role in climate change adaptation for food security and SDGs. And first, most important priority for tropics is the water issue. We can see here that where the tropics are seen, particularly in Southeast countries and Middle East countries, the 17 most world water stressed countries in tropical ecosystem. Almost 50 to 60% of India is under faces high, extremely water stress situation, and at the same time, India more than 55 to 60% is rain dependent agriculture. So the technology is very, very important. When we talk about water is the crisis for the sustainable agriculture in typical rain-fed system in tropics, the important mechanism is we have 1 meter rainfall average but how to retain that smallholder farmers in slopy lands, and how to conserve and how to saturate into the soil profile is important technology. How in situ water harvesting and land treatment, how to retain and store, recharge and reuse and efficient use is a philosophy of integrated watershed management in the tropics. We can see here that very important technology. In fact, Government of India is taking that farm pond technology. The land requirement is 5 to 7% it takes for farm pond. When we are getting intensive, in fact, and 4 months, 5 months crop season, instead of that, at least 15 to 20 rainy events. Now, what is happening is hardly 3 to 4 rainy events are having. Whenever extreme rainy events are happening, that water is stored and we want to utilize life-saving irrigation during mid-season droughts. Sir, one of the important study indicates that one life-saving irrigation gives 25 to 35% of yield increase in several rain-fed crops. Then once we see that, in fact, intensively the micro irrigation is promoted in India, and wherever water will be crisis in rain-fed dryland systems, micro irrigation utilization is very intensive. It is estimated that with micro and pressurized irrigation, that the water utilization can be enhanced 5 to 10 times depending upon the crop. Then another important target which is coming up is the multiple uses of water harvested in farm time, not only for groundwater recharge, and we can also go for fish and duck and other culture, so that same water can be again reutilized for the agriculture purpose. So it contributes to groundwater recharge and also fish production and also duck production and also other boundary vegetable cultivation and also irrigation. So that is the way we would like to see that the technologies intensively implemented multiple uses of water. And once when I said that 55-60% of the very water stressed parts in India, when we have different components and the integrated farming system where livestock and horticulture and annual crops are there, we would like to see that priority of this water utilization should be given to the animals, followed by horticulture, then annual cereal crops. Second important component, how to restore and the resilience capacity through soil system. In fact, most of the tropics, particularly South Asia, Indian systems are very poor in soil organic carbon. What we suggest to the land departments is that any human being, if the heart is weak, that how is performing, functioning the weak. So that is the way we explain that when soils are very low with organic carbon, overall the power of the soil to produce is very weak. So we need to see that at most that how to increase carbon. So along with carbon, soil fertility, soil health can be increased. So one of the important aspects, in fact, 10 years back, 15 years back, we used to see that larger percent of crop residue is to be burned. And nowadays, several government programs have come, and a lot of crop residue is being recycled. In fact, I take one example that around 20 million tons of sugarcane trash used to be go waste out of farm around 7 years back. Now intensively it is being used as a mulch cum manuring in state of Maharashtra, typical dryland region. So another important aspect is coming, the technology is taken, the smallholder farmers, wherever the residue is there, they are using the drum technique and converting to biochar and adding as the amendment. The larger benefits are derived as a water retention and really water storage during mid-season drought and slowly carbon improvement and nutrient enrichment. Sir, it is estimated that by improving soil carbon in a 1 meter profile, I think we can really cover many crops. We can really improve the groundnut, finger millet to pearl millet to rice, upland rice. The food security can be improved. And we have seen that it is not that once recommended. In fact, the organic matter sources should be on farm, locally, ecosystem based. So these are the different species. For example, how to improve, how to generate on farm and these things. For example, cover crop, very important. In fact, around 8 million hectares of area in different rainfed regions where cover crop can be taken as a source of organic matter, just to take as an example of one technology. And soil erosion, when I said that high intensity rice is going with the soil erosion, we would like to see that is the largest spended program, MG Narega is there. We want to see that the larger parts are covered, restoration of degraded lands by recycling the tank silt. Here, one example we can see here that when tank silt is eroded fine soil material, when we are bringing back to the soil cover is soil color is changed, productivity is enhanced, the carbon content is increased, fertility is increased. So we need to see that what are the policy interventions that every year, every after 1 year, the tank silt can be recycled to the farmlands. So another important is that though conservation agriculture, we all agree that it's a tonic for sustainable issues and soil wealth issues, but one of the critical factors in conservation agriculture, typical drylands in light textured soil is termites. The crop residue is eaten by the termite, but despite of that problem, still we are getting, once we are leaving the crop residue on the soil, 10 to 15% is retained till the next crop is there. That really contributing to this monocropped area into the double cross, and economic benefits and soil health benefits are enhanced. This is the one example when we have taken typical rain-fed paddy rice systems is converted in integrated farming system when we included multi-commodity farming, legumes and horticulture crops and fish and duck systems and farm pond. The productivity enhanced, resilience capacity is enhanced. Even if one system is failed, another system is coming up, including backyard poultry. Another important aspect is that as per the Indian forestry policy, we need to cover the 30% of forest cover. There is a scope 10% that limit. So we are really country is moving to bridge this gap through agroforestry systems, which really can provide security and stability of the farm income that was estimated recently. We would like to see that multiple stress tolerant, as I indicated nowadays, typical dry regions are also affected with the floods, and the flood regions, high intensity regions are affected with droughts. So we wanted to see that multiple stress tolerance, either crop varieties and breeds and other species. In fact, under NICRA project, many varieties, many germplasms, many these things are available, which are under practice and implemented now. Fodder system, in fact, in terms of 62% methane is emitted from the livestock sector, and we would like to see that the efficient fodder system at least to replace 1/3 of green fodder to reduce not only productivity enhancement and methane reduction and overall resilience capacity. Agro advisories, in fact, large scale we are implementing, in fact, not only district level, mandal level, village level, intensively is coming up under the various schemes, and this can really risk aversion is possible. And India is in fact one of the country where climate resilient villages were established, ICR system, where weather, water, crop, fertilizer, carbon, and village institutions are important. Really, these things are being replicated. For example, we have established 151 villages. For just example, one state of Maharashtra replicated 5,000 villages with 5,000 large-scale investment recently.
Not 2 minutes, please.
Yes, sir. Another important aspect is we have developed agriculture contingency plans for all 650 districts, sir, and these are being implemented. Some of the states are very, very important, proactively implementing towards the climate preparedness. And these plans we have extended to the SAARC countries, other countries now to implement. And this is the UNFCCC climate negotiations when this workshop was there. In fact, India is the first country which has developed and implemented agriculture contingency plans at the ground level. Integration of agro-technique is very, very important. Not only tolerant varieties, but integration of genetic material as well as soil, water, weather, and the storage insurance. When we culminated all these things, the overall resilience capacity is created. The last but one slide I would like to see that, sir, India becoming of lesser storage systems, we are getting 1/3 footage loss. At India level, we have more than 600 agri startups. Now we want to see that valuation processing. NARM itself, we are hosting 103 agri startups, and we are helping how valuation processing storage is possible. We'd like to see that food loss reduction through agri startups. And overall, the framework for climate preparedness is that we need R&D, of course, research and development. Education, we are targeting students, younger students, school education, and also other private colleges, capacity building and training, community sensitization and policy development, and through sensitization of policy makers, large-scale implementation of these climate adaptive practices at the village levels are implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rao, for excellent presentation. Lot of material, very useful. Hopefully, we'll come back for discussion at the end of the session. So we can move on to Dr. Slack's presentation. Donald Slack, who is a Professor Emeritus of Biosystem Engineering, Watershed Management, Ecohydrology, Arid Land Resources Sciences, Civil Engineering and Architectural Engineering, and Mechanics at University of Arizona. The title of presentation is Water for Agriculture in the Face of Mega Drought in the Southwestern USA. Dr. Slack, the floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Lal. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm probably deviating a little bit from some of the other presentations as I'm giving you an overview of what's going on in the Southwest US in terms of agriculture and water. And I think it was mentioned earlier about the 1,200-year mega drought that's ongoing in the Western US. It's a little bit more than the Southwestern US. It includes California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and as you can see, it moves over into Texas and some of the high plains. It particularly affects agriculture production in California and Arizona, however. In Arizona, we rely on water from the Colorado River primarily for our agriculture. California relies on that for its agriculture in the southern part of the state. And as you can see from this slide, that drought has been ongoing for a long time. In 2015, it was a very severe drought. And California is the largest agriculture producing state in the US. It has a $50 billion revenue for agriculture and produces over 400 commodity crops, which are grown across the state. And that includes fruits and vegetables and nuts, as well as other products, livestock. Arizona has important agricultural production, particularly along the Colorado River and in central Arizona. Arizona produces over 90% of the leafy green vegetables grown in the United States in the wintertime, and 100% of the iceberg lettuce crop that's produced in the US is grown near Yuma, Arizona. That all uses water from the Colorado River. Irrigation water for California comes from two major sources. The mountains of Northern California and the Sierra Nevada provide water for the Central Valley, and the Colorado River provides water for the Imperial Valley in Southern California and for the metropolitan areas of Los Angeles and San Diego. So metropolitan areas are a very large water user for water resources in California as well as in Arizona. In California, the drought has resulted in significant reductions in the amount of water available for agriculture from these irrigation systems, a reduction of 25 to 75% of the water in some areas. And this is, of course, for irrigation. This is for some farmers to remove orchard crops, and actually, strangely enough, some of them have moved to Arizona. Water for Arizona and Southern California comes from the Colorado River. And I'll give you a little overview of the Colorado River here. And unfortunately, this slide gives you quantities in terms of millions of acre feet. An acre foot is roughly equal to 1,230 cubic meters of water. And as you can see, the Colorado River basin includes 7 states, with the headwaters in Wyoming near Yellowstone National Park, and also significant contributions to the water from Colorado. All of this area has been affected by the mega drought. So the mega drought that we're experiencing actually is comprised of 3 of the types of drought that Dr. Lal mentioned. Of course, the meteorological drought has restricted the amount of water that is falling on the watersheds, and that leads to a hydrological drought, which reduces the stream flow. And then the use of water by our large metropolitan areas of Phoenix, Tucson, Los Angeles, and San Diego actually is contributing to a sociological drought. So we have all of those. One of the problems with the Colorado River water system is that in the 1922 Colorado River Compact, the water was divided up amongst the upper states and the lower states. And at the time they calculated the annual flow of water in the Colorado River to be 15 million acre feet, which was averaged over the previous 10 years. And that was an unusual wet period. The Colorado River really doesn't flow that much and hadn't been flowing that much over a 30-year period at that time. On top of that, then in 1944, Mexico was added to the allocation, and they just added another 1.5 million acre feet. So they brought the total allocation to 16.5 million acre feet, when in fact the river only flows around 12 to 14 million acre feet per year. And of course, it's overallocated in terms of transferring water outside of the basin. The Front Range of Colorado gets water. There's a Chama project in New Mexico that gets a lot of water. And as I mentioned, the Imperial Valley in California and the cities of Los Angeles and San Diego take water from the Colorado River. So we used to say that the Colorado River was the Nile of the American Southwest, but it's a very overallocated Nile. This shows you the water availability of the Colorado River system and how it's declined just over the last 3 years. In 2019, there were 36.9 billion cubic meters in storage in the reservoir systems along the Colorado. 2 major reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, are the ones that are generally operated to provide water and electricity to the Southwest. By 2022, that had declined to 22.4 billion cubic meters, which is a reduction of 39%. And as mentioned, this has been ongoing because even in 2019, there had been a significant reduction over the long-term storage in those reservoirs. Central Arizona irrigated areas from Phoenix, which is this area on this map, and southward towards Tucson includes an area here that's called the Pinal County in central Arizona. And there grow some winter vegetables there and small amounts of maize and wheat, but alfalfa and cotton were traditionally the major crops that are growing there. And although the Phoenix area receives a significant amount of their water from the Salt River Project, which is fed by the Salt River, which flows out of the White Mountains in eastern Arizona, the Pinal County and the Tucson area now receive all of their water from the Colorado River via the Central Arizona Project. And formerly, Tucson and Pinal County relied solely on groundwater. This is the quick view of the Central Arizona Project, which was a series of dams and canals that was authorized in 1968 and completed in 1993 at a cost of $4 billion. A canal of 336 miles in length, which brings water from the Colorado River to just south of Tucson. And although the justification for that project was water for agriculture in central Arizona, most of the water now serves the urban areas of Greater Phoenix and Tucson. So there's a significant competition for water between the metropolitan areas and agriculture. In Southeast Arizona, the total amount of water for irrigation comes from groundwater. There's two areas, the Sulphur Springs Valley and the Sulphur Springs Valley Aquifer and the Douglas Aquifer. And if you look closely, you can see a number of little dots there. Those are center pivot irrigation systems that totally use groundwater. There's a single farm in this area, just south of the playa or the dry lake bed here, that has 198 center pivots and farms that contributes water for a little over 10,000 hectares. Within the past 5 years, this area has seen an influx of farmers from California moving their nut crops, primarily pecans, from California because they were running out of water there. And there are no regulations controlling the withdrawal of groundwater in this area. So it's being heavily overexploited and probably will largely be depleted in 25 to 40 years unless some measures are taken to control the withdrawals. These are just a couple of the current crops. Cotton has been a major crop in central Arizona, and lettuce grown along the Colorado River, as I mentioned, is a major crop in that area. Alternatives and consequences to what's happening, the reductions of irrigation water. The Central Arizona Project is going to be taking reductions of at least 21% in 2023. The farmers face several options. They can fallow. They won't plant much or all of their farmland. They can change to a new crop, which uses less water, and install water savings irrigation systems such as subsurface drip where soils allow. And in fact, the state of Arizona is committed to subsidizing farmers to do that. This is just a view of a California almond orchard, which was abandoned due to the lack of irrigation water. So there were thousands of acres in California that actually gave up their nut crops. This was a headline from the Arizona Daily Star in July of 2022. Farmers are fearful of their Colorado River cuts, and this was primarily farmers along the lower Colorado River. There has been a transition to subsurface drip for cotton and other crops in central Arizona over the last 6 or 7 years, as shown in this slide. And there is significant interest in crop substitution. Waiuli is being considered as a cash crop alternative to cotton. The Bridgestone Tire Company has a research facility in a plant in Goodyear, Arizona, and they are actually contracting with farmers to grow Waiuli. So there's a good chance that this will be an alternative crop if there is water available. It uses only about half the amount of water of cotton. And some of you probably know triticale, which is being considered as an alternative forage crop to corn or maize. And that Coronado Dairy that I mentioned in southeast Arizona is looking at using triticale as a fresh chopped forage for dairy cattle. So in summary, that was a very quick overview, but a mega drought which has persisted in the western U.S. and particularly the southwest U.S. for the last 20 years has significantly reduced water availability in the Colorado River Basin and in central and southern California. Reduction of water allocations to farmers in this region have ranged from 25 to 75% and will continue. And that's significant because crops can only be produced with irrigation in most of this region. We don't have rain-fed agriculture here other than range crops. To cope with this lack of water, farmers are faced with several alternatives. They can quit farming, and many of them have or will. They'll fallow much of their cropland. They don't plant all of their land to crops. They switch to lower water use crops, which I mentioned, and switching to water saving irrigation technologies such as subsurface drip irrigation. That was a very quick overview, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions if there's
Thank
time.
you. Dr. Slack, that was an excellent presentation. Very good summary of the mega drought situation and how to address it in your last slide. We do have a time for one question.
Yes,
Yes.
Professor Lal, I would like to ask Don about the tension between urban and rural. I remember Dr. Hogan, UC Davis, they always arbitrate between this tension in California between people in cities and the rural California. The same is happening in Arizona. But this is reflected even in the major rivers around the world. This tension is going to increase. My question is the way out of it, because this sometimes trigger fighting, like in Sudan, because between the people who are doing grazing and settlers in agriculture. Thank you.
Dr. Slack, please, very short answer.
Yes, well, that's a very good question, and I don't have a very good answer. I'm afraid that tension is going to increase, and what's happening in the U.S. at least is that the urban areas are winning out. They have more political power than the farmers, and so that's why farmers are going out of business. The urban areas haven't given a lot of thought to where they're going to get their lettuce and their food from. But so when we go out of business, when the farmers go out of business, they'll have to eat something besides lettuce.
But
Thank you, sir.
this is
Thank
an
you.
answer, yes.
I'm sorry, we are going to move on. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. Hadid, Dr. Ayman Abu Hadid, Emeritus Professor at the Arid Lands Agricultural Studies and Research Institute, and Shams University, Cairo, and former Minister of Agriculture of Egypt. The title of presentation uses smart agriculture to improve water use efficiency and energy saving under climate change challenge in Egypt. The floor is yours, sir.
Professor Lal, I think Professor Abghani Gindi is doing this because it's joint paper between the two of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
ده انا ما شفتش اوكي sorry. I think this slide summarized what the concept of precision and digital agriculture. Just summarized. But as we know that the agriculture is a major consumer of the water. For example, in Egypt, we used more than 80% per year. And some African countries already reach the water poverty. For example, in Egypt, we reach less than 535 cubic meter per year per capita. So how to solve this problem? We are facing, the problem can be solved by to add new water resources, and it is very difficult, or to improve the water management techniques in order to save any wasted water. I think the second solution is better. This is a climate change and the effect of the agriculture. I think the effect will be on increasing the evapotranspiration or water consumption of most of crops, and in the same time reducing the yield of most of crops except cotton. This is a slide for Dr. Ayman Abu Hadid. The concept of what's the meaning of the precision agriculture? It is how to apply, are we applying accurate agricultural inputs, starting from land preparation up to harvesting, including selection of the accurate seeds, water, fertilizer, and all of the agricultural inputs. While the digital or the agricultural concept, how that use of the information and the communication technology. The concept of the irrigation or smart irrigation, how to control using some techniques like estimating the water consumption using the weather station or the high-tech weather station. Sometimes use the soil probe or soil sensor to control the water applied. In Egypt, this is for Egypt, the traditional irrigation, the efficiency of the traditional irrigation is about average 50%. And this is very low. For sprinkler irrigation or for pressurized irrigation, I think that we can reach 85% up to 92% for localized irrigation system. And I am going to explain the modification of the surface irrigation, how to increase the efficiency from 50% up to 80%. This is a software for precision agriculture. For as I mentioned before, that we have to use accurate inputs, and you can reach or you can obtain a good package for how to deal with agriculture. This is for a weather station or satellite weather station. This slide shows how to use the soil probe or soil sensor probe to operate any of the pressurized irrigation system. Thus, you can this is a satellite, and you can use directly to operate the sprinkler system or central pivot or that. This is a very new devices for estimating evapotranspiration. It is a self-flow. It is independent on how to estimate or to measure the velocity of the liquid in the stream of the. It is a very, very new devices for this. These are some flow sensors using in smart irrigation to control the water, to control the time, control the amount. As you see, some solenoid valves, some controllers, some digital or central control, some digital water measured or water flow measures. Now I am going to what happened in Egypt to save more water or to use or to introduce a smart agriculture. We have about 4 mega projects or national projects. The first one developing and motorizing the own farm irrigation system. It is already started and for developing about 5 million faddans in Delta, in all the land. The second one is the reclamation of desert and developing of irrigation system. It's about 4 million faddans. The third one is protected agriculture, and the project includes about 100,000 faddan. The last one, the plantation of forest and the development of sustainable forest in desert land using its needed source water. Now, we start with the first one. It is some irrigation problem in Egypt, at least, when you use a traditional method for irrigation. Now, as I mentioned, that the mega project or the national project for developing the traditional method, many objectives. At least raising the efficiency of on-farm irrigation system, as I mentioned before, from 50 up to 80%. Saving against possible quantities of water, as Dr. Adil mentioned, that we can save about 10 milliard cubic meter per year by the end of the development of the 5 million فدان. التكنيكس اللي احنا introduced the techniques that we use only instead of we used one lifting point or one lifting point. We replaced all the open channel Mesca and Marwa by underground piping system, and I think as it is save more water. We introduce the laser techniques for leveling. We for the applying localized irrigation only for horticultural crops in the delta. The cultivation on mechanized raised and wide beds, applying search flow and using climate. Sorry. Okay. These are the summary of the modification of surface irrigation or traditional irrigation method. We introduced, as I mentioned, that we replacing the open channel by open Mesca and Marwa by piping system underground. We use laser techniques or laser leveling. We use gated pipes for distribution water, and there is the raised bed. Raised bed, we have many research about the raised bed. We save about 20% of applied water with increasing the yield of wheat by 17%. This is a very many localized irrigation system, drip irrigation, bubbler, mini sprinkler. It depends on how to replace or how to change from surface irrigation in horticulture in Delta to the modern irrigation or to pressurized irrigation system. The second one is the reclamation of desert. We have 500,000 فدان in Toshka and 1.5 million فدان. This is a new project, plus 500,000 فدان في مستقبل مصر, and the last one is 2.3 million فدان for a new delta. In reclamation or reclaimed project, we must use only the pressurized irrigation system, and it is easy to control the water and use the smart irrigation with the pressurized irrigation system. So it is a center pivot or linear or localized irrigation system with different. This is a integrated management project in the area where the water quality with high salinity water. You can use for fish farming production, and you can take the water from the farm for aquaculture to the plant or the crops. The using of the solar energy. The third one is the protected agriculture. As I mentioned, we started already 100 million فدان, and the good example for water saving, water and energy saving. Greenhouse more yield was with similar or less inputs, improving green design. Increase in yield up to 3 times. The slide for Dr. Ayman Abu Hadid. The shading, I think, as decreasing or reducing the water consumption. A semi-closed green can save water. We can collect rain.
Doctor, give me 2 minutes, please.
2 minutes, okay. This is an example for a greenhouse. For example, for tomato, for produce 1 kilogram for tomato. If in traditional irrigation method, you use about 162 liters for 1 kilo. For drip irrigation, it is 63. For soils or for greenhouses, I think as 40 liters to produce 1 kilogram. Oh, gosh. This is a plant factory as a modified atmosphere, temperature control, LED light. Basic water needs for drinking for person, for one person as 2 up to 4, for household 40 up to 40 up to 400, for food 1,000 up to 5,000. The second one is 1 liter of water produce 1 kilocalorie. While to produce 1 kilogram for wheat, you used 1,500. For meat or beef, you use about 15,000 cubic liters to produce 1 kilogram. The last, the establishment of plantation and so for precision agriculture, now we use a smart machineries, a big smart machineries now, satellite, drone, if it is available in Egypt, I think it is, up to now, it is very difficult. This is a harvesting, a very smart harvest machine. So the last one is how to transfer the technologies. I think expanding the establishment and building or capacity building, create short courses, use the visual, modify the bylaw of the program and faculties. I think as like GIS, like remote sensing, artificial intelligence, modeling expert, I think.
Please try to conclude, if I may request.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. Digital saving water techniques, and hopefully we'll come back to you for some questions. The last speaker is Dr. Abdul Hamid, and Dr. Hamid is research professor and head of the botany department of the National Research Center in Cairo, Egypt. The title is Biosaline Agriculture as an Opportunity for the Sustainable Development of Rural Areas and Coastal Regions. Dr. Abdul Hamid, the floor is yours. 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for introduction. First, I would like to thank Dr. Adil for kind invitation to be here. My topic today about saline agriculture in Egypt and all over the world. I tried to simplify this issue and show in a few slides, and I hope to success to get a brief introduction and summary about the current situation of biosaline agriculture. Climate change may have direct effect on water quantity in Egypt, and which lead to indirect effect in Mediterranean salt water intrusions to groundwater, with exposed to agriculture and vulnerability. Soil salinity is crucial problem, not in Egypt, but in many areas all over the world. Especially in Egypt, when we talk in Egypt about salt-affected soil, I think around 1/4 or 1/3 of agricultural land in Egypt is salt-affected soil. So this issue is very crucial to Egypt. So this issue needs, we have to pay attention and deal very well with this issue, because, as I mentioned, around 1/3 of agricultural land, which represent around 10 million acres, is salt affected. Most of salt affected soil in Egypt located in Delta, either in north or eastern or western, and El Fayoum, and some other different locations. This is the component and area of salt affected soil in Egypt. So we need to adapt for this situation and deal how and invent a new strategy to deal with this issue. First, we have to define what salt-affected soil. What are salt-affected soil? Salt-affected soil, in briefly, includes different type of salinity, saline, sodic, and saline sodic soils, and many subcategories. Saline soil contains excessive ion of soil, especially mainly sodium and chloride and other not main ions. And in this figure, this is illustrates the impact of salt in plant growth. Explain briefly how to affect the salt on the health of the plant. There is no much water. The plant can't absorb water, even the nutrient available, but the plant can't absorb, and there is no enough air, so there is no aeration, and at the end the plant will be wilted because the plant can't absorb and take up the water. What are the main causes of salt-affected soil? Salt-affected soil can be a reason of, can be naturally, can be due to not efficient irrigation system or no drainage system, or not efficient irrigation. So there are many types for the reason of salt salinity in the soil. These figures also illustrate the factor influencing and effect on accumulation in the soil. Arid, as I mentioned, salinity, salinization, and salt-affected soil is mainly in arid and semi-arid region. So that's very clear for all that this area, the dry area, is affected with this type of stresses. What are the impact of salt-affected soil? Salt-affected soil is a serious problem, as I mentioned, and can affect the ecosystem and agricultural productivity, and decrease the ability and buffer and filter against contaminant and degraded soil structure. There are many types for influence of salinity in the plant and the ecosystem itself. So at the end, that will affect the agricultural productivity. Where we find that's important to know the current situation and situation of salinization and salt-affected soil over the world. The FAO created as soil map for salt-affected soil, and we'll show this next slides. They have some techniques for creating this. This photo and figures show the salinity situation, where salinity concentrate, and in the upper 30 centimeters. And this shows the salinity in the upper from 30 to 100 centimeters. So Egypt is clear affected with salinity stress. This is another also to prove the situation of salinity and all over the world. And Egypt is, there are many areas around the world, in US and Latin America and North Africa and South Africa and Asia and West Asia and Australia also. The reason for the number, also one of reason of salinity is, as I mentioned, the reason of salinity and desalinization is the scarcity of water. So this is dominant in arid and semi-arid region. So the area with red color, this is affected and have less amount of precipitation, so less amount of rainfall, so they are suffering from salinity. So the map created by FAO explains that more than 400 million hectares salt affected, and more than 800 million hectares of subsoil are salt affected soil in general. The classification of the salt affected soil is, we have different around more than once. The American classification and FAO classification and Australian also. So for either for irrigation water quality or salt affected soil. So, but we have here, in Egypt, we use both sometimes. We use FAO classification, sometimes we use US classifications. And this also explains the FAO classification, but with sensitivity to crop, productivity of crop under different salinization levels. So moderate, moderate salinity, we can grow some not tolerant, we can sensitive, and with strong, we can grow tolerant crops. This is the area of salt-affected soil and distribution all over the world. As we see that MENA is more than, in topsoil, more than 97 million hectares salt-affected, the area we are living. In next slides, next few slides, I will show some figures, some result through my project, our project funded from Egyptian Academy of Science and Technology. This project created, and this it was a call for NIDA for dealing with COVID in 2020 to deal with this area in the new land with salt-affected soil due to ground saline water. The place of this pilot plant for this, it was in Mogra, and Mogra Oasis, because Mogra Oasis is the location below the Marsa Matruh, around 54 kilometers. And this is, the soil is good itself, because now we are working in this project for more than 1 year. But the problem there is the saline groundwater. The saline groundwater reached to till 12,000 ppm. So, but there the situation is different. That means we have different, variation in the salinity groundwater. Saline groundwater is different. We can find some wells with 2,000 ppm until 12. So so we established a farm model to guide the farmers and investors here in Bogora how to deal with this condition with saline groundwater.
Dr. Hamid, you have to. I need a clarification from management. Dr. Baltagi, do we have another 13 minutes? According to my time schedule, we should have 13 minutes left for general questions. Although we are over time, but we started 15 minutes late.
Yes, I think we can take about 10 minutes because we have the African Young platform. We'll start after that. We can take 10 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you. 10 minutes for Q&A. And I would give one question for each of the speakers, beginning with Dean Galraza. One question, short answer.
Okay, no questions.
Is there a question?
Yes. The first question for yourself itself, please.
I will come back. We want to go to Dean Galraza. That's a priority. I'll come back if there's a time left.
Okay. I don't see any question.
Okay. All right. Then we move on to Dr. Jha. One question for Dr. Jha. If not, I will ask a brief question. You mentioned optimization of conservation agriculture. Could you please explain what that means in the context of dryland agriculture? Very short answer.
When I say okay, what variety the fur openers of the plant, those component technologies over and above the three interrelated principles of conservation agriculture. I think that's something important. It's not like one size fits all. You need adapted variety, adapted water management, adapted nutrient management, and which will be context specific, farmer specific, rather than like a variety which what we take. So that optimization is important.
Thank you, Dr. Jha. Dr. Rao, one question for Dr. Rao, Srinivasa Rao. If not, I want a clarification. You mentioned soil erosion was a major problem in the dryland semi-arid region of India. What is a practical solution to control it?
Sir, one of the important measure we are taking is that cover crops we are promoting. In fact, in different ecosystems, we have some off-season rainfall available. During that time, we would like to take legume cover crops and either incorporation or leaving on the soil cover. That is the important strategy which is being promoted in several rainfed drylands.
Thank you. Okay, I was hoping the answer might be conservation agriculture, but there's no time to discuss that. One question for Dr. Slack. If there is none, I would like a clarification, please. Desalinization of water has been used very, very productively in some parts of the dryland agriculture. Is that an option during the mega drought area? Are there economic way to desalinize water and use it for multiple purposes, including?
Well, in fact, there is a fairly large desalinization plant at San Diego, which produces water for them. And our governor in Arizona, as one of the things that he wants to investigate, is the use of desalinized water, which would probably come from the Gulf of California or the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. And that would be for municipal use. And then the water that is saved from the river and so forth could be used for agriculture. Although an alternative that is certainly being pushed now is the use of gray water and to some extent black water for agriculture use in Arizona especially.
Thank you. I think that could be the recycling gray water would be very useful. Thank you,
Yes.
sir. I want to move on to Dr. Elgindi. Any one question for Dr. Elgindi?
Just,
Yes.
Professor Lal, just what Dr. Gindi was describing and he was aiming at is a national program for optimizing water use, which is coupled with intensification, which is coupled of a holistic strategy aiming at optimization of income for small farmer in the Delta to start with. And therefore, he is using the optimization of water use efficiency as a tool to achieve this. And I'm just commenting because this is part of the strategy which collectively we participated in.
Thank you. That's very
thank
useful information. And thank you so much. I want to move on to Dr. Abdul Hamid. One question for him related to salt-affected soils. He mentioned 424 million hectares surface soil, 833 subsoil having salinity problem, which probably will aggravate with climate change. One question for him.
Well, it's, I don't know, it looks like a Quaker church meeting. There's nobody, no questions. People are...
Well,
yeah.
we have made so good presentation, no questions are left. I think that's the interpretation. But aerobic rice was mentioned using raised bed. I remember that slide of raised bed with aerobic rice.
This is a Gindi. Yeah?
Is that an option on a large scale?
No, he cannot hear you.
Yeah, it is option now for the Egyptian agriculture that we are going to use this bit at least for wheat, and now we try with the rice.
Yeah.
All right.
There was a question for you, Professor Lal, from Professor Shetter. He is a soil science. He was a chairman of soil science department. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Shetter.
Yes, I think I thank you for good presentation you gave us concerning farming carbon. And I would like to ask you about how to keep, if there is any new methods to keep carbon in the dry areas, because as you know, most of our soils have less than 1% of carbon or organic carbon. Therefore, it is very important right now to deal with this project. So thank you.
Well, that's a very good question. You are very right. Dryland soils are not the best place to conserve carbon, but yet it's needed. Please remember, inorganic carbon, I mentioned, is a very important component. So formation of secondary carbonates and formation of bicarbonates and leaching them out are mechanism of inorganic carbon. Nonetheless, mulch farming, mulch is not only with biomass, but also gravel mulch. I was surprised nobody mentioned anything about gravel mulch in dryland. China, of course, is a great success story where they have been cultivating 300, 400 millimeter rainfall area with the successful gravel mulching. So I think that's a very good option. But some of the other technology mentioned today, certainly anything that increases productivity of the crop, trees, whatever biomass is being grown, and some of it can be returned back to the soil would certainly improve the organic carbon content. And what I was impressed with all the presentation, that many practices shown did improve productivity, which is a sign to increase organic carbon content over time.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you. Back to you.
thank you.
Thank you very
Don't-
much.
Don't go, Professor Lal. I would like to thank you for graciously giving us your keynote address as well as sharing this session.